The webinar. Great. So welcome everyone. My name is Mericka McCabe. I'm a scientific engagement manager with protocols.io. And today I'll be presenting our Getting Credit for Method Development with Protocols.io webinar. Some quick housekeeping before we jump into the slides. We will be recording the webinar. You'll receive a link to the recording as well as a link to these slides either later today or sometime tomorrow. Closed captioning is enabled if you want to use captions, and I'll show you in the next slide how to turn on translations. There will be Q&A at the end. Please feel free during the webinar to add any questions to the Q&A box or to the chat. And there's also a webinar feedback survey at the end where you can give feedback, suggest any topics you wish we would cover in additional webinars, or anything else. And we have other webinars. We have a Getting Started webinar and a Tips and Tricks webinar for more advanced users. Today is our Getting Credit webinar. So if you want to sign up for those, you can visit protocols.io/webinars. And you're always welcome to request a demo to meet with one of us one-on-one should you have additional questions. So for those of you who'd like to use captions today, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see this option to show captions. When you click it, you'll see an option that translations are enabled and you can set the language for the captions, and it does a pretty good job of auto-translating. Today's agenda will be an overview of the methods renaissance, sharing publicly on Protocols.io, how to publish your peer-reviewed protocols, and how to link any protocols or peer review papers, any protocols to papers or peer review, and then lots of time for Q&A. So we're going to take a step back in history. Methods have really only recently been a focus of the scientific world. The journal Nature Methods was started only in 2004, so about 22 years ago. And at the time, there was a lot of skepticism, even within the Nature publishing group, around the launch of Nature Methods, because they thought that when people publish, they publish research, and no one wants to read just methods. And you can see this quote here from the founding editor-in-chief, Veronique, where she talks about the fact that at the time, methods papers were still considered pretty dismissively, and people didn't actually give a lot of credit to a methods paper on its own. But methods have an impact. And what's really striking is that despite all of this skepticism, there was a study back in 2014 where Nature compiled the list of most highly cited papers based on data provided by Clarivate. For those of you who aren't familiar with Clarivate, they own Web of Science and are involved in calculating the impact factor for journals. And this looked at 98 million papers dating back to 1900. And on the list of most cited papers, which actually was updated in April of last year, so just over 1 year ago, it's really dominated by research techniques. Many papers on laboratory techniques are those most highly cited papers of all time. The three most highly cited, in fact, are technique papers, and each of them has over 200,000 citations. And there's been this surge in method sharing with journals like Nature Protocols, BMC Methods, Cold Spring Harbor Protocols, and Protocols.io, which is now part of the Springer Nature family. The reason that open methods is really important is because people are starting to understand that there's a value in methods. We're pushing for open science movement focused on open access publications, open and fair data and code sharing. But in order to understand how people got the data that they're sharing openly, you need to understand the methods. Complete methods are necessary for you to look at the data and look at the results and completely understand them accurately. I could hand you a ton of chocolate chip cookies and say, repeat this, and you could try to, but unless I give you that actual recipe for chocolate chip cookies, you're not really going to understand or be able to replicate my exact recipe. And so over time, there's been some policy recommendations for improving methods availability and for openly sharing methods, including ProMap from the European Commission and a UNESCO recommendation on open science. And there's kind of an idea that through modular publishing and through openly publishing various aspects of our research, we're able to not only get credit, but also to accurately share and openly share the individual discrete research outputs. So this example from Nature Communications paper is a really nice example of modular publishing where the expression constructs are published on AdGene, protocols are on Protocols.io, and then the molecular structure is on the Protein Data Bank or PDB. And everyone who's responsible for those outputs gets credit for them. And people also are able to better understand this Nature Communications paper because they're able to go to each of these discrete research outputs. This is where protocols.io comes in. Our mission is to make it easy to share method details before, during, and after publication. If you're here, you've hopefully heard of protocols.io before and know that we're an open workflow tool and repository for method sharing. But just as a bit of background, on the public side, protocols.io is an open methods repository. With Protocols.io, you can share your methods openly with a citable DOI. You can link these methods to papers and get credit for your method development, and then you can discover and reuse others' methods. Currently, there's over 226,500 public protocols, and you can contribute to that growing collection. There's also a private side, which is an experimental workflow tool. On the private side, you can document and track your method tweak and evolutions. You can collaborate with your lab or with global partners on method development and keep your methods private until you're ready to publish. We also have tools that enhance protocol drafting and troubleshooting, and that's available on this private side. And Protocols.io supports FAIR methods. So for those of you who aren't familiar with FAIR, which is often referred to for FAIR data, FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And Protocols.io meets all of these criteria. We're findable, we're indexed on Google Scholar. We're accessible. All of our published protocols have CC BY license, which means that anyone can build upon that protocol. We're interoperable. We have open API for integrations with ELNs and submission systems, and we're reusable. Protocols can be versioned, forked, and run. If you haven't been on Protocols.io before, or if you're only just getting started, you may or may not be familiar with our step-by-step protocol format. And these protocols move away from a static PDF where you might type up your steps and then just leave it be, hopefully update them a few years later. Our protocols are dynamic and interactive. You can update and improve in real time before you've published the protocol while you're working on it in the private side. If you're tweaking your experiment and you realize changes need to be made, you can make those changes and they're immediately made across the protocol shared with everyone you've shared it with. You can version or fork the protocol, so you can make new updated versions of your existing methods, or you can build upon others' methods with forking. And you can track changes over time by comparing versions, comparing forks, or in the private side, going back to a version history. And with Protocols.io Premium, you can see a full rollback of version history with the Open Science Plan that's slightly more limited. It's also collaborative. As I mentioned, if you make a change, anyone else will see that change. But also people can be editing and commenting on protocols at the same time. And you'll see here a nice example of commenting. You can search protocols on Protocols.io, add in multimedia, and you can have really selective sharing and permissions. And for those of you who are less familiar, I highly recommend you join our Introduction to Protocols.io webinar. And for those of you who have understood Protocols.io, but maybe need more tips to get your protocol ready, I recommend going to our Tips and Tricks webinar. And today the webinar focus is really on publishing. So we have several options for publishing protocols on Protocols.io, and I'll go through some of those today. The platform is really built to be flexible, and there's several ways that you can publish your protocols, either as a standalone method. This is really good for authors who want to just openly and transparently share their lab's methods, and it might not be associated with a manuscript yet, or it may never be associated with a manuscript. It could be a really generic protocol that you'll just never feel the need to associate with a paper. You also can link protocols to research papers, and this provides detailed methods that support the findings in that manuscript. Rather than having a little block text of methods in a materials and methods section, you can get into really detailed step-by-step, reproducible and reusable methods. Today, I'll focus on this linking protocols to research papers. And part of why this is important is because people are citing protocols from Protocols.io. If we look at data pulled at the start of this month, you can see that over time, more and more manuscripts are being published that cite protocols from Protocols.io. At the count, there were over 9,000 total publications from 1,000 unique journals and 181 unique publishers. I mentioned before that Protocols.io is part of the Springer Nature family, but we are publisher agnostic. So you can publish a protocol in Protocols.io associated with a manuscript in any journal from any publisher. Excuse me. So first, I'll talk about directly citing the DOI of a protocol from Protocols.io. The importance of directly citing a DOI is that the first author is able to get recognition for their method development. You'll see this example here from Nature Communications, where the author, Kelsey Ramirez, is the fourth author on the paper, but is the first author on the protocol because that author was intimately involved in the development of the protocol that was crucial to this manuscript. And so now this can be tracked on a CV. And also we have a metrics tab on Protocols.io. So Kelsey can go in and see how often this protocol is being accessed or cited. And this might be different from the paper and allows Kelsey to get a unique measurement of their exact contribution. What this looks like is in the paper under the materials and methods section, they've added in the DOI for the two methods that they've put step-by-step protocols on Protocols.io. And if you go to the references section, you'll see the full in-text citation with the title, the authors, and the DOI. And both of these link to Protocols.io, which in turn links back to the paper, ensuring that credit is maintained in both. This is also really important for method transparency. Sometimes papers are behind a paywall and subscription based, but protocols published on Protocols.io are open. And if you reference a protocol from Protocols.io in your references section, as was done in this previous example, that's available even if the paper is behind a paywall. So people are able to go and see the abstract, the data availability statement, and the references, and they can find that Protocols.io reference. And even if they can't read the paper itself, they can understand that that protocol was used and access it. I'll talk also about our journal partnerships. So we have several journals that we partner with on Protocols.io, and they're all visible under our peer review options dropdown, which you can see anytime you're viewing one of your protocols that you have not yet published. The key to whether you should pursue this path is if you have a research paper that's associated with your protocol, and if that research paper is suitable for publication in one of these journals. So these journals cover a variety of fields, and some may be more suited for you than others. This really depends on the individual guidelines of the journals as well. So I encourage, if you're interested in any of those journals, to go and look at what their requirements are, what their guidelines are. With some of our partnerships, we have peer-reviewed ability as part of the partnership. So with PLOS ONE, for example, protocols can be peer-reviewed as part of that journal article. And those peer-reviewed protocols will receive a peer-reviewed methods badge on Protocols.io and also are associated with publish PLOS ONE lab protocols. And here you can see from three of the authors that they were really excited by this integration and the ability to publish these lab protocols associated with protocols from Protocols.io. We have Professor Monica Trujillo, who says, "I'm from a small country in Latin America that made me famous in my country." Dr. Simon Trotter says this is the first first paper as a senior author. And the way that this is linked with PLOS ONE lab protocols is that they require concurrent publishing on Protocols.io. So when you publish a lab protocol with PLOS ONE, you also have to publish a in-depth detailed protocol on Protocols.io. And these are linked to each other, where in the materials and methods section, it will say the protocol is published on Protocols.io, but there's also a See This Protocol button that will take you to the protocol on Protocols.io. And when you're viewing that protocol, you'll see the link to PLOS One. If you hover over this and click it, you're taken to the journal article, and you'll see that peer-reviewed methods badge. We also have a partnership with BMC Methods, where you can elect to include your protocol. And again, that can be put into the materials and methods section, and you'll have that journal badge and the peer-reviewed method badge if it was put into peer review during the process. We also have two direct integrations with our Springer Nature partners, Nature Cell Biology and Nature Cancer. So when I say direct integrations, what I mean is that these are done when you're actually going through the manuscript submission system of Nature Cell Biology or Nature Cancer. In these cases, when you're in the EJP, which is the manuscript submission system for Nature Cancer or Nature Cell Biology, as you're going through your submission, upload files, you'll eventually get to the Open Research Services. And if you want to contribute protocols from Protocols.io, you'll mark that you have methods that are central to the reproducibility of the manuscript and that you would like to use Protocols.io to submit these protocols for peer review. You'll then have a methods availability link that appears in your manuscript tracking system overview. This also will get emailed to you if your paper makes it through initial evaluation and is continuing on through the editorial process. And when you click that link, you're taken to a My Springer Nature submissions section in Protocols.io, where you're able to add protocols directly to that manuscript submission. And when you send those protocols, they'll have a reserved DOI. They'll still remain private, but they can be shared with reviewers and reviewed for a peer review badge, and then later associated with the manuscript when it's published. I'll stop here also and mention that if you're interested in hearing more about getting your Protocols.io protocols peer reviewed, we ran a session at Love Methods Week in 2025. This is an event that happens every February. And in 2025, we had an Ask the Expert journal editors and published authors about peer reviewing your protocols. You can scan this QR code, and I'll also be sure to include this link and this slide in the follow-up email from today. And I really encourage you to watch this because I think it's a really helpful discussion with some authors and editors about publishing in journals and getting credit for your protocols. And then I'll just walk through a really quick case study. So you can enhance your profile with protocol publications. In this case, Dr. Jacopi Cicerone was able to publish his protocol on Protocols.io. This was linked to a PLOS One peer-reviewed method, and we did a spotlight video, which you can click and watch on this research and this protocol. What's really important to note, and I'll stop here for 1 second to note this, is that when you publish a protocol on Protocols.io, it's not just that you're publishing the protocol and then it can't be changed. As you are developing your method, as science is moving along, the evolution of your method is able to be transparent and trackable through versioning. So in this case, in October of 2020, version 1 of the protocol was published on Protocols.io. In April of 2021, version 2 was published, and then a month later, that PLOS One lab protocol peer-reviewed journal article came out. And then in September of 2022, version 3 of the protocol was published. So the protocol was able to be updated in real time. And what this means is that people are able to track that evolution and be able to follow your methods as they grow without having to go through a formal editorial change through the journal. And you can always go back and look at version 1 and compare it to version 3, and I'll highlight that later in our live demo. I'll mention also that you're able to track your protocols and how they're being reused really easily on Protocols.io with this metric tab. Once your protocol is published, you can go to the metrics tab and see how often was the protocol viewed. In this case, it was viewed almost 4 times more than the actual paper associated with the protocol. How often is it being bookmarked? How many people are saving this protocol to come back to later and keep using? How often is it being forked? This means how many people are taking this protocol and adapting it for their own use. How often is it being run? This means someone is going into the protocol, clicking that run record, this run button, and following this protocol as a step-by-step checklist or making changes of their own in real time. And going back to Dr. Jacopi, the publication on Protocols.io was really important for helping enhance visibility. And one of his quotes is that the protocol gave him a lot of recognition. He was lucky enough to have been invited to lectures and practical sessions at various universities because of this protocol on Protocols.io. It also is really helpful because you can find protocols across different disciplines. So one of our favorite stories is this paper about three-spine stickleback parasite. Someone was looking to do RNA extraction from primary cortical neurons, and this paper had an associated protocol on Protocols.io that actually someone recommended for them because even though they weren't working with this three-spine stickleback parasite, and in a completely different discipline, they were able to find a protocol that would work for them. And another quote from Dr. Jacopi was about the fact that his PhD was specific to a really certain time period in a region, but he was able to add this methodological aspect that went beyond these boundaries and that others could use even if they weren't working in that same time period and that same region. And you're also able to connect with other researchers. So Dr. Luciano Martelletto talks about how 80% of his recent collaborations were a direct result of sharing protocols publicly on Protocols.io. This is a really good example of how sharing your protocols allows you to connect with others. As people find them independently or by reading your journal articles, they're able to reach out to you and perhaps collaborate or get advice from you in some way. And so, publishing on our platform is another avenue for people to understand what you're doing and perhaps work with you. And now I'll transition to the live demo of Protocols.io because this is more focused on publishing and getting credit for your methods. It won't be our normal live demo where we walk through creating protocols, but I'll talk about just getting started with maybe your existing protocols, publishing protocols, and the features of a published protocol. Let me open the site. Great. So when you first come into Protocols.io, you'll be brought to the welcome page. And you can skim through some of our featured protocols or immediately search for protocols of interest to you. You can create an account, which is free and open to anyone. And when you make an account, you'll have a workspace in the file manager that you'll be working out of. Within the workspace, you can create separate folders in order to easily store your protocols and your methods. And those will be the methods that you eventually will publish on Protocols.io. If you want to create a new protocol on Protocols.io, it's pretty straightforward. You'll go in and click New Protocol, and then this will allow you to select where you want to save the protocol. Give me 1 second to just move this toolbar. There we go. And you'll have a new protocol that's completely a blank canvas. This allows you to format your protocol as you choose. You'll go in, add steps, add sections. You can add information like components. And again, this is really covered in detail in our introduction webinar if you are just getting started. For those of you who have already developed your methods and all you're looking to do is upload it onto protocols.io so that you can publish it and get credit for the method, there's 3 simple ways to do that. The first is that if you create a new protocol from Scratch, you can insert steps from text and you can paste in your protocol, copy from your text file and paste it in either numbered or as lines being steps or mark down the text. And that will then import the protocol, import the text file into a protocols IO protocol format. The other really easy way is to import your protocol and then convert to a protocol format from a PDF, doc file, PowerPoint, JPEG. And so in this case here, I had my IHC protocol that was a Word doc. If you drag and drop that file in as well, you can select it and click the Protocolify button on the right here. And that converted that Word doc into a step-by-step protocols IO format, which will take a second to load because of the internet. There we go, which you can see here. And then you would just go through, check to make sure that everything was imported correctly, perhaps add in additional details if you want to add any images, remove any information like username and password that you don't want included in your publication, and then publish the protocol. You can also upload files from external cloud storage. So we have several apps that we have integrations with that you can upload files directly from there and convert those into Protocols IO. Or we have a Protocols IO, we enter protocols page, which I will pull up now. And I'm realizing that I didn't do that correctly. We enter protocols, should be there. Where you can send in your protocol to us to check and import for you and format for you into the Protocols IO format. And you may also have a coupon code for free protocol entry from your organization if you are part of a premium institutional organization. So those are three really easy ways to just upload existing documents onto Protocols IO and get them ready to publish. Once you're ready to publish on Protocols IO, there's a few options. So if we come in and view this protocol, at the top you'll see publish, reserve DOI, post draft, or sign. Signing is a feature that's only available to our premium Protocols IO users that locks the protocol so that it can't be edited anymore, but it's not published, it's not citable, and it is not editable. So the protocol is stuck in one place, but still private. Reserving DOI also has the protocol remain private, but you can still edit it, and this gives you a DOI that you can put into a manuscript that you're submitting without having the protocol published just yet. And then publish, this green button will take you through the full publication workflow. If you have a protocol with a reserved DOI, which you'll see here, you'll have that reserved DOI show up when you're looking at the protocol, but you'll see that it's still private. And you can get, by clicking the I button here, the DOI and the private link for reviewers. So when you send this private link, reviewers are able to open and look at your protocol without you knowing who they are. You can also come in to the metadata tab and get a blind link. So that will also remove your author information if you're doing double blind peer review. Under the protocol information in the metadata tab, you'll see also the protocol's full citation, which you can download as a bib file and put into your citation manager if you have one. And you'll see a note here that this is an unpublished protocol because I've only reserved the DOI. If we then find that DOI in a published manuscript, we reserve the right to publish the protocol to ensure that it's now accessible to anyone. Once you're ready to publish the protocol, you can go through the publish workflow. And now this is an example of a protocol that I've published, and you'll see that globe icon, meaning that the protocol is public. Again, it has its own DOI. And next to that DOI is that Cite This button that includes the citation that you can copy or the download that you can download. This is an example of a non-research protocol, which we do allow. So this is coffee preparation. It's a non-research protocol. But if you want to see what a published research protocol would look like on Protocols.io, this is an example of one that's a peer-reviewed method. It's linked to a Nature cell biology paper. So this was done, this protocol and paper were linked together through that Springer Nature integration. When you stumble upon the protocol on Protocols.io, you'll see that Nature Cell Biology link. And if you click that, it will take you to the journal article on Nature Cell Biology. And that peer-reviewed button means a badge means that when this protocol and manuscript were both being reviewed, the authors, the reviewers, and the editors confirmed that they did look at this protocol. You'll also see the Cite This button available there. And in the metadata tab, there's a protocol citation and a manuscript citation, as well as all of the funder acknowledgments. With a public protocol, once it's been published, anyone can make a fork of the protocol, which means that they can build upon that protocol. So this protocol is generation of human trunk-like structures from human pluripotent stem cells. Perhaps I wanted to make my own version, my own variant of the protocol for mouse. I could make a fork and I could adapt the protocol for my own needs with mouse samples, mouse stem cells. You can also run the protocol and treat it as a step-by-step checklist, or if you want to work with the protocol as a printout, you can export it as a PDF. So going back to my protocol here, when you go through the publish workflow by hitting that top left publish button, you'll be required to complete your protocol. We require a complete title beyond just IHC. It would need to be immunohistochemistry for paraffin-embedded tissue. We require an abstract. This is 2 to 4 sentences that explain for others exactly what you've done in this protocol and makes it easy for them to find and build upon your work. So I'm just going to put blank text for now. We also require you to include any funder information if it applies, and author information, which needs to include first name, last name, and any affiliations. You can discard any comments that exist if you don't want them to be there, or you can leave the comments on the protocol. You might have comments from privately working on this with your collaborators. And then here's also where you can mark this protocol as working, in development, other, and whether it's research, which would index it in Google Scholar, or a non-research protocol like a cooking recipe that you wouldn't want indexed in Google Scholar. And then you can highlight which workspaces you want the protocol to be in. And finally, you'll need to go through and preview and check the protocol, and then have a confirmation. And so this is a 6-step system. It's really hard to accidentally publish your protocol, and you need to complete every single step. All right. I've covered everything for the live demo, but if there was anything that you wanted me to cover that I didn't, please let me know and just put it in the chat, and we can always hop back over during the Q&A. So one question we get asked a lot is, what do I do if I want to share methods for an already published paper? And that's a really good question, and it's really important because I know a lot of you might have found Protocols.io after your papers were published. So when you're creating your protocol on Protocols.io, in the description tab, you'll want to scroll down to manuscript citation and add in the citation for that existing manuscript that protocol was developed from. And we absolutely support people adding their protocols onto Protocols.io later. It's important to note that this will be a one-way connection though. So whereas any of the previous examples I've shown have the protocol referenced in that paper, and then the paper links to, or excuse me, the protocol itself links back to the paper. In this case, people will be able to find your paper from the protocol, but they won't know that the protocol is available on Protocols.io unless you've advertised that somewhere else, because that's an unfortunate downside of uh, the static nature of papers. People also ask what if they want to publish a protocol that someone else was developing, or perhaps you want to publish a protocol that was really critical to your work, but it was from a kit or from a company. Our stance on that is that it's okay to put it on the platform, but as with any research output, you shouldn't claim the credit yourself. You should provide a citation if it exists. As much information as possible. If the authors exist, put their authors. If it's a Promega kit, for example, you can say Promega scientists in the citation and make sure to give credit to the original developers. And so this is an example that someone did where they put that a protocol was adapted at its they linked the original paper that it's adapted from. They highlighted resources that they incorporated into the protocol. And also, someone could always come in later and claim authorship if they're on Protocols.io and they see that a protocol is theirs. One thing I will note is that we really encourage that if you are going to do this, to first reach out to those authors or to reach out to that company and say, I'm planning to put this protocol on protocols.io. If you're doing it privately, you don't necessarily have to reach out to them, but if you're publishing the protocol, reach out and say, I'm planning to publish this. I just wanted to let you know, make sure it's okay. And if you would like to claim authorship, I'm happy to give you authorship. And so I'll just quickly summarize that a lot of organizations are encouraging the use of Protocols.io. We have journals and publishers, we have funders, and we have institutions that all support Protocols.io, either recommending them during manuscript submission. As I mentioned before, we are publisher agnostic, so we have journals and publishers that are not in the Springer Nature family who recommend Protocols.io during submission. We have a lot of funders that either require or recommend their grantees to upload their methods on Protocols.io. And then we have campus license with premium access to Protocols.io through many of our institutional partners. If you need any help as you're getting started using Protocols.io or you want to learn more, we have a lot of really helpful resources in our Help Center, our tutorials page. You can always submit feedback or ask questions on the site. We have webinars 3 times a month across different time zones. So this is the Americas based time zone. You can watch recordings of previous webinars. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you can always request a one-on-one demo. We're happy to meet and discuss with you one-on-one if you have any questions that come up as you're using Protocols.io or as you're trying to publish your methods. And you can request a dedicated webinar or email us at info@protocols.io in order to get more answers to your questions. And so, with that, I will end the session today. Please feel free to reach out to either myself or our info@protocols.io channel. We really appreciate feedback if you're willing to fill out the webinar feedback survey, and I'll paste that link in the chat as well. Um, and I'll take time for any questions people might have. You can either put the questions in the chat, put them in the Q&A box, or if you raise your hand, I can give you permission to speak and unmute you. And there's the link to the webinar feedback survey. Are there any questions? Yes, I see a hand raised. So Patrick, you should be allowed to talk.
Hi, thank you, Mericka, for the presentation. I thought it was really helpful. So I have a couple of protocols that I've published in Protocols.io, and on one of the protocols, we have found that we can use it to do some other things. So it's more than just a modification of an existing protocol. I'd like to sort of publish it as a separate protocol with these new additions to it that allow us to do some other things. So the best way to go about that, would it be to fork, which I think essentially means sort of copy an existing protocol and then make the modifications where they occur and then sort of publish it under sort of a modified title because it also has an additional author. It's one of my graduate students who use that to be able to do these new applications. I'd like to be able to get her credit for that.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm trying to pull up the example. Um, Let me see if I have on, you know what, I know where I have it is my other Chrome browser. One second. Um, but yes, that is absolutely what you could do. So you can make a fork of your protocol, add in the authors. You can also add in authors later for different versions. It doesn't, the authorship can always change with different versions. And actually, even if you've published a protocol and later realized that you missed someone in the author list, that is one thing that can be updated after it's published. But what you're describing specifically would be to make a fork. So we think of a version as if you're taking a vanilla cake recipe and changing the amount of sugar slightly, that would be a version. A fork is you're taking that vanilla cake recipe and making chocolate cake. One of
Hmm.
the really nice things about a fork is that it will always link back to the original protocol. So this example from Josh Quick in 2020, he was able to really quickly adapt his Ebola virus sequencing protocol into a NCOV 2019 sequencing protocol, January of 2020. So this was really quick adaptation. And that's a fork from the method. And so that links back. So you know this method is built upon this other method, but it's different enough that it deserves its own um, kind of thread and sequence, and it doesn't replace that other method. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I think that's exactly the type of thing we'd be looking to do.
Great. Yeah. And to do that, you can just click that copy fork button and click make a fork, and then start working from that. And the other thing I'll note also is that anyone can make a fork of your protocol, whereas a version, the original protocol owner has to approve that it's a version because the version will sit over older versions. So in this case, version 4 sits on top of version 1. When you go to this protocol, you're taken to version 4, whereas a fork won't try to send you back to the other protocol.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions? Let me check the Q&A. I don't see any. All right, I'm going to stop recording